You're watching Channel 4 News with 5-time Emmy Award-winning anchor Ron Burgundy and Tits McGee.
Good evening, San Diego. I'm Veronica Corningstone. Tits McGee is on vacation. Tonight's top story took place at the popular Arizona Club restaurant, located at the top of the Chase Tower in Phoenix. At 10 a.m., a call was placed to 911, reporting a release of a green-yellow gas. The gas seemed to be coming from a corner just outside the kitchen. This gas caused patrons and employees to develop nausea, lightheadedness, blurred vision, and difficulty breathing. Police, firemen, and the Maricopa hazmat team, along with paramedics, arrived at 10:30. By that time, workers and occupants of each of the lower floors of the Chase Tower were developing the same and worsening symptoms. So far, 300 were affected and 15 have died. Among the victims were several emergency responders.
First responders' mindset en route should be that they don't want to be part of the problem. To arrive upwind, isolate the area and deny entry, get information that they need to evaluate whether or not it's a real incident, what the product is. It's extremely difficult to resist rushing in, but still we see that happen time and time again in the real world. Those first responders become part of our problem.
Chlorine gas is approximately 2.5 times heavier than air, which explains why those below the area of release were significantly affected. The tower's ventilation system was not able to disperse or dilute the gas. Chlorine gas is non-flammable, but it is a strong oxidizing agent. If in contact with other chemicals, such as petroleum or ammonia, chlorine gas can cause an explosion. Chlorine gas poisoning results from exposures to chlorine beyond the threshold limit value. At 1 to 3 parts per million, there is mild irritation of the eyes and nose. At 5 to 15 parts per million, there is moderate irritation. At 30 parts per million and beyond, a person will experience immediate chest pain, shortness of breath, and cough. At 40 to 60 parts per million, the lungs become inflamed and acute pulmonary edema can develop. Concentrations of about 400 parts per million and beyond are generally fatal. There is no antidote for chlorine poisoning. Management is supportive after evacuating victims from the site of exposure. Victims were decontaminated using portable units provided by the American Red Cross, Maricopa Fire Department, and the Maricopa County Health Department. All clothing had to be removed. Victims were then drenched with large amounts of water, which included flushing their eyes. After decontamination, victims were given fresh clothing and triaged to various participating school auditoriums and emergency departments throughout the downtown area. Medical treatments included the use of supplemental oxygen, corticosteroids, diuretics, and bronchodilators. The more severely affected required intubation and mechanical ventilation. According to the Department of Homeland Security, chlorine is a chemical of interest that has 2 screening threshold quantities. At 500 pounds, there presents a theft hazard. At 2,500 pounds, it presents a release hazard. Chlorine is a threat because it is easily accessible, inexpensive, and capable of massive casualties. Chlorine gas was used by the Germans in World War I at the Second Battle of Ypres, killing hundreds and injuring thousands. Captain Justin Case and Captain Ewan Army are hazmat chemical experts who were interviewed about the hazmat emergency response process.
It is the hardest thing for a first responder to not make entry into the area and try and save somebody. The very best thing that you can do is isolate the area and deny entry. It's tough, but you got to do it.
When your team arrives at the incident site, it's time to put your emergency plan into action. Depending on your resources available to you, your personnel and equipment, several things should happen simultaneously to contain the incident. Establish incident command, establish safe zones and hot zones, secure the site, evacuate and treat victims, and monitor the air. Upon arriving at the site, establish a buffer zone around the site to secure and maintain public safety. Since the release may involve a gas cloud, consider wind direction when establishing this zone. The first step after setting up the buffer zone is to don proper PPE for a site assessment. Use of binoculars is sometimes helpful to identify leak sources. Don't rush in without properly trained personnel. After the initial site assessment, set up an action plan. Do not spray the site with water, as it may make the chlorine release worse. Water reacts with chlorine to produce corrosive acid. Constant monitoring of wind speed, condition and direction, and if available chlorine levels, is necessary to maintain the buffer zone and guide the containment process. Places of shelter will need to be established at a safe distance from the release. These areas will be incident specific. The size and severity of the spill will determine where the safe distance zone will be located so that exposure to the release will not occur. This shelter is not only the staging area, but also a resting place for responders, so water and first aid supplies should be present. The command post should be located separate from the shelter area in order to facilitate an effective response. But it's important to make sure that it and the command post is mobile in case the refuge has to be moved quickly due to a shifting gas cloud or other reason. Site security is also critical. Work zones need to be established, designated hot, warm, and cold. Control over who enters the hazardous areas must be tightly monitored by an on-site safety officer, and appropriate medical monitoring must be determined and carried out. Be alert to the possibility that the incident is a terrorist or criminal act, and be cautious. There may be secondary devices or acts perpetrated during the course of the response. If you find evidence, try to protect it for investigators. Responders should be aware that some tank cars are equipped with tracking devices or similar devices that may look suspicious. Assure that Chemtrec or Canutech has been activated. In the U.S., the Chemical Transportation Emergency Center, or Chemtrec, provides immediate advice to you at the scene 24/7 and will in turn immediately contact the appropriate responder group as required. In some cases, it will be the shipper, but Chemtrec will also activate the Chlorine Emergency Plan, or ChlorRep. ChlorRep is an industry-wide emergency plan that includes trained emergency teams located throughout the U.S. and Canada.
Currently, process enclosure and exhaust ventilation are being used to decontaminate the tower. No access will be permitted until the chlorine concentration is lower than 0.5 parts per million as determined by air sampling. Whether the incident was due to an intentional release, a spill, or a containment failure has not yet been determined. From the entire Channel 4 News team, I'm Veronica Corningstone.
And I'm Ron Burgundy. Go yourselves. Nice work, everyone.
What in the name?
Sharp broadcast.
No!
Really good. Everyone on the floor as well. Really a lot of hustle. I liked it.
I gotta fire you.
Ed, let's hold on. Let's count to 10, all right? That's a rash decision. Okay? Is this about something else?
Ed, there's 300 very angry San Diegoites.
San Diegoans. San Diegoans.
San Diegans.
San Diegans.
San Diegans out in front of the station. They want Ron's blood.
They want to hurt you, Ron.
Ron, why did you say that? Why? Why, Ron? Why?